guys, welcome or welcome back to Cincy Junior Sabbath School Shop. If you're new here, please like and subscribe. If you don't have the book, you can find it at www.juniorpathpoint.org. And for the Cornerstone, you can find it at www.cornerstoneconnections.net. We're on lesson 2 for both lessons. The title for today's lesson is Blessing the Blessing. The text is from Mark 10, verse 45, and it says, "For even the Son of Man cannot be served, but to give his life a ransom for many." The title for the cornerstone lesson is "The Father of God chose for his Son." The text can be found in Luke 3, verse 22, and it says, "You are my beloved Son, and in you I am well pleased." Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the discussion. Bye.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our show. I have a couple special guests with me. I'm your host, Vanessa, and whoever's going to be giving us our PowerPoint summary is
Julia.
And then for our cornerstone would be Sophia. And then our special guest is
Steven.
So, starting with today's lesson. Today's lesson is about Julia.
This week's lesson was about giving yourself to Jesus and inviting him into your daily life.
Thank you. So now it's time for our questions. For the PowerPoint questions, how did Jesus as a youth portray traits of servanthood?
One trait he portrayed is washing his disciples' feet.
Okay.
7, his dad when he was a kid.
Uncle Steven?
So he grew up helping others and helping his parents, his dad in the carpenter shop, and the Sabbath school lets us know that he was actually pleased to help others all the times. And so even as a child, since this week is focusing on his childhood, he was very helpful to others. So that's how he was a servant.
All right, thank you. Next question. Why do you think Jesus was a blessing to others? Julia?
Because he offered forgiveness to people.
I agree. Okay.
Also healed the sick and the brokenhearted.
Uncle Steven?
Yeah, so he, as you know, this is in connection to the previous question. So he was he really loved helping others, and so the lesson helps us see, for example, that he was sympathizer with others. So what does it mean? When somebody was suffering, even as a child, he would be feeling sorry for them and try to help them, which you don't tend to see much in young people as a youth, like a 12-year-old or 10-year-old. We don't see that often, right? But he was, even at his young age, someone who really blessed others, and he wasn't doing it to get merit or anything or to get praises. He just really earnestly liked helping others, and that's how he was a blessing to others. And that's why the lesson, the Bible verse in Luke 2:51 says that, 52, it says that he wasn't just he grew in stature, right, and in wisdom and in favor to God and to men. So he wasn't just a spiritual person who wanted to please God, but he also somehow was able to be a blessing to men. And so men were drawn to him. And when I say men, I mean humans were drawn to him because he was just a blessing to everybody that he was surrounded by.
Thank you so much for your contribution, your answer. I think that Jesus is a blessing to others because he was always willing to help people like turn their lives to God and to notice like the wonderful powers of God. On to our next question. What do you imagine unselfish courtesy meant in Jesus' daily life? What could it mean in your life?
I think it could mean like doing things willingly or like an acts of service. For like an example, like if you see an elderly at like a grocery store, you could help them bring their grocery to their car.
Mhm.
That is like willingly.
I agree. Okay.
He was able to help others without thinking about it, and also he lived a selfless life. And
Thank you. Stephen.
Now, I agree with them both, Julia and Pokia, what they said. And the example that Pokia gave, like helping somebody without expecting anything in return. When you're helping, sometimes when we help people, like the question has like says unselfish courtesy, right? So the question is, what is selfish courtesy? So what does it mean to be selfish when you are being courteous to somebody, right? And to me, that means that you're doing it with something attached. Like you're hoping that you're gonna gain something from it. Like for example, in school, sucking up to your teacher, right? Be nice to the teacher, but there's some selfish motive behind it, right? Or be nice to the coolest kid or the coolest classmate or schoolmate,
Yeah.
because they're the cool one, right? So you want to be close to them. So you're not being nice because you're being like genuine, but you just want to be seen as you're associated with the coolest person, coolest girl, the coolest guy in school. And so those are examples of selfish courtesy. So Jesus was the opposite, and he was generally helping without expecting anything in return, or not to get any praises or any price from it. So
Thank you. On to our next question. Our fourth question. Many youth today want to be served rather than serving. How can you find true glory and joy in life and become a useful member of society?
Again, like Uncle Steven said, you can do things like through humility without thinking you're gonna get something back out of it. You're doing it because you know it'll like praise God, so you're doing it willingly.
Thank you.
okay, actually, thank Julia and Uncle Stephen has already said, and also being humble and helping people attract blessings from God at the end of the day.
Thank you, Uncle Stephen.
yeah, so there's everything my sisters have said. Essentially, being willing to help, um, knowing that first of all, Jesus was our example. When he came, he was a servant. We are learning this week that he was a servant even as a child. He loved serving people. And we know as an adult he was a servant because he was healing people, helping people, guiding people, you know, forgiving people. And he also ultimately showed the example by washing his disciples' feet. And the real ultimate example is dying on the cross, right?
Yeah.
So he was the ultimate example of what a servant is. And he kept trying to teach his disciples, listen, if you want to be the leader, like you need to serve. And then they didn't get it till after he resurrected, right? But he kept telling them, this is not like, you don't try to get into leadership position by trying to like oppress people or like step on people. No, you have to be a servant. And he kept showing it, he kept preaching it, but also showing it as an example. And so we hopefully can see his example and want to emulate it. And at the same time, if you think about it, even people who are non-Christians value being a servant, helping humanity. Like a lot of people who are rich or are non-Christian, they love doing humanitarian stuff because besides helping the other person, there's actually something that happens within you when you help others, and you see that you've been able to help somebody. You held their hand and then held them up, and you got them back on their feet financially, through food, emotionally, whatever that is, spiritually. Even non-Christians or non people who don't believe in God find value in that? How much more those of us who believe that this is how God is and He wants us to be like Him and He wants us to be a blessing to humanity, how much more should we want to also become servants to others? So hopefully we can learn that, and it doesn't have to be big things, little simple things. Little simple things. I'll give you a perfect example. A perfect example. It's Sabbath school morning. Chairs are not, there, and then you get there first. You grab your chair, you sit down. That's it. How about the other chairs? How about others? How about setting up chairs for the others? They're not here yet, but these are some small examples of what it means to be a servant to others, right? Yeah, with no unselfish, right? Unselfish courtesy.
All right. Thank you guys for the powerful PowerPoint discussion. Now, on to our sponsors. Hope CB Ghana streams on Sundays at 12 p.m. and Tuesdays at 3 p.m. CB Radio Ghana every Monday, 7 p.m. Obrat TV every Monday to Friday. On to our cornerstone discussion. Okay, I would like you to give us our summary for this week's lesson.
Okay, so this week's lesson talks about the generational traits of Jesus Christ and how he was born in prophecies that came to fulfill the Lord.
Thank you. Now on to our first question. Okay, why is it important when we learn about Jesus' human ancestors to recognize that ultimately Jesus is the Son of God?
By fulfilling the prophecy and also through divine nature, we get to know that there was a time that a man was being prophesied to come to the world and save people and came through.
Julia?
I think it's important because it allows us to see like God's true goal of helping us to be redeemed.
The second question. Oh, Uncle Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, sisters, for the response, and I agree with them. On top of that, I think even besides being a son of God, like the question is a question we could ask ourselves is, why did Matthew find it important to trace Jesus' ancestry all the way back to David and then all the way back to God, right? Why was it important? And I think I agree with what Pokia said, that prophecy, right? Because like I said, I think actually it wasn't in this setting. I was talking to somebody earlier, but even the Jews who didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah understood how important it was that whoever the Messiah is when he comes, will have to be able to trace their genealogy back to to God, back to David, and back to God, right? And so Matthew found it very important that before I even talk to you about this Jesus, let me tell you whose son is Jesus, right? And who are his ancestors, so that you have no doubt that not only he's the son of God, but also he's also son of David. I don't want to get too far ahead, but I think that was the importance of why he started the book of Matthew, first chapter, with the genealogy of Jesus.
Thank you guys so much for all of your answers and contributions. On to our second question. What can we learn from Matthew's account of mentioning some women in the blooding of Jesus? Okay.
Actually, it talks about the faith and courage that they had, and also the redemption that they had through Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Julia.
It can show us, or we can learn that like the people that God used in the Bible, he used like people who weren't perfect to make his divine like point and like purpose for us.
Uncle Stephen?
Yeah, I agree 100% with both of what you're saying, and how God is willing to use us imperfect beings. And what better example is the fact that the holiest human that has ever lived on this earth is Jesus. And if you look at the title of the lesson, the cornerstone lesson title says, "The Father's God." When you read the title, it doesn't make sense. Like, what English is this? It's hard to understand what the English means, right? But the Father's God chose for his Son, meaning the ancestors that God chose for his Son Jesus, right? And so out of these ancestors, he chose Rahab to be one of them. Rahab was a prostitute, was not even an Israelite. She was in Jericho when they found her. Yet she became mother of Boaz, who then was the father of grandfather of David, right? God chose not only Rahab. Right after Rahab, he chooses Ruth. Ruth, as far as we know, was a virtuous woman. But was she Israelite? No, she was a Moabite. So she was she was part of the people that actually were fighting the Israelites, right? Yet Jesus chose his lineage, God chose Jesus' ancestors to go through these women. Not only them, you also have um, Bathsheba. And the Bible and some researchers are saying that Bathsheba was not actually an actual Israelite, right? And then there's one more woman. Actually, it's before. We have to go a little bit earlier. Tamar. There's a whole story about Judah and Tamar, but Tamar was also not an Israelite. So God chose these women. And it's interesting how when you read the genealogy, it doesn't even mention Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah, the wife of Abraham, the patriarch of patriarchs. It doesn't mention Rachel, for example. These were women that were really valued among the Israelites. But guess what? For some reason, when it comes to Jesus, the highlight is these women that were not even among God's people.
Yeah.
But God chose these women to be among Jesus' ancestors. Like, what does that tell us? Like, how much God cares for all humans, not just the Israelites, not just his people, but he can use anybody for his purpose, as Julia said earlier. So it's powerful because of that.
I totally agree with all of you. Thank you guys so much. And then on to our third question. David lived approximately 1,000 years before Jesus. So how was it possible for Jesus to be the son of David?
Actually, it's telling us the lineage of God. Yeah.
I agree because he's a descendant of him.
Yeah. So son of David. So son, you know, in today's in this modern world, a son means son. Like there is no ambiguity about it. Like we only mean a male child of some parents, right? When we say son. But back then, uh, son also meant descendant of, right? Descendant of. And so when people met Jesus and said son of David, it's because they believed that he was the Messiah prophesied in the Old Testament, and they believed that as a Messiah he was the descendant of David. And so when the Bible says son of David, it's interesting because there's a point in the Bible when Jesus is having a conversation with the Pharisees, and he asked them, like, so you say that the Messiah was the son of David. So then why did David say, referring to the Messiah, my Lord sat at the right hand of my Lord? So why is David calling the Messiah my Lord if 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 the Messiah was meant to be the son of David? Who calls their son my Lord? Right? So he was trying to drive a point. And the point Jesus was making was that, yeah, the Messiah was the son of David, but you guys are putting even David above him. The Messiah was actually Lord. And David understood that. And so it's interesting how he makes that argument. And then when you read that conversation, that back and forth debate, you realize that Jesus was trying to let them know, listen, just like I've been trying to hint, the Messiah is bigger than what you think. And he is the son of God. He's not just the son of David. He's the son of God. He is God himself. And so that's just a powerful part of this whole thing about son of David. And as they said, it means lineage, descendant. But Jesus was saying, in other words, I am the son of David, but I am bigger than that.
Yeah. On to our fourth and final question. What lessons have you learned from the passage?
Okay. Actually, I find that no matter how, no matter who you are, God can use it for His work, and also no matter where you come from, it can be someone like can be someone to work for God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think a lesson is that God's plan for us is like deep from history. That's the lesson.
Yeah,
Stephen?
I echo the points they've made, and especially Julia is making a point that I'm like, wow, that's deep too. Like the fact that we learn about Jesus, but the plan was there from the beginning, and so it's amazing how God, He thought all this thing out, and generations before Jesus, it was already planned that through Abraham's descendants, and then eventually through David's descendants, his son will come and die for us and live and show an example and so forth. So that's great. And then I also echo Pokia's point that God can use anybody. If He could use these women we mentioned, who were not among God's people, who also some of them had bad reputations.
Yeah.
If He could use them, He can use us, and we should make ourselves available for Him to use us for His purpose.
I agree. Well, I'd like to tell you guys all thank you for tuning in today. Just remember that Hope TV Ghana streams on Sundays at 12 p.m. and Tuesdays at 3 p.m. And I would like to say thank you guys for tuning in, and we hope you join us next week. Bye.